Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ontario Public Transit Association Opta Live webinar series. My name is Karen Cameron. I'm the CEO of the Ontario Public Transit Association, and it's my pleasure to introduce our friends from longstanding member Trapeze Software Group. These sessions require the generous sponsorship of our members, and we're very pleased to have you joining us today for this important conversation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Ashley Diorio.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. We're really excited to be here today and for Opta hosting us. Today's webinar will be jammed packed. The focus for today's webinar is building resilient communities, how Ontario's transit agencies can leverage transit technology to help solve urban mobility challenges. So as I mentioned, it's a robust agenda. When we first started planning this webinar, we wanted to really spotlight some local Ontario agencies to share what they are doing for their communities. So we will have that. The great thing about our industry is that we can all learn from one another. So I want to thank our special guests for joining us today. From there, we'll provide an overview of transit technology and the ecosystems of possibilities that these transit technologies can provide transit agencies. Finally, last but not least, we'll conclude with a focus on mobility planning. So let's start the webinar. And again, I want to thank our transit agencies for joining us. So today we have Paul Comfort from Trapeze, who will be hosting this portion of the webinar. And with us today, we have Carla Avis-Birch, who is the Chief Planning Officer of Metrolinx. Carla, thank you again for joining, as well as Jason Simmons, the Manager of Transit Operations from Guelph Transit. Thank you, Jason, for joining us. Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you to lead this portion of the webinar.
I think we have you muted, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. Great to be with you. And thank you, Karen, for helping to put this whole event on. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm Paul Comfort, who I work with Trapeze as the Senior Vice President, Chief Customer Officer, but you might know me as host of the Transit Unplugged podcast, the world's top transit executive podcast, heard in 100 countries, or author of the book, The Future of Public Transportation. It's great to be with you. I love public transportation. I love what we do. I love the people in it. And I love how we're so tied in with tech. Really, I've heard one person say recently that public transportation is probably one of the most cutting edge high-tech industries, more than almost anywhere else except medicine. There's so many things going on. Three of our big trends happening right now in the industry are microtransit, zero-emission buses, equity and inclusion in public transportation. And our guests from our two agencies are going to be talking about that and how they're working on those hot trends right now. Then I'm excited to have my buddy Geoff Gray here, who's going to be talking about the technology that Trapeze and Vantis have to help you achieve those ends. And then even more so at the end, Tyler's going to talk about using that big data, moving us into really this next year as well. We know it's key. Next slide. So first off, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of all you already probably, Jason Simmons, my new buddy from Guelph, who's going to be talking about what they're doing now with demand response transportation. Also some very cool new ways to approach zero emission buses. Jason, the floor is all yours, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Paul. My name is Jason Simmons. I'm the manager of Guelph Transit of Operations here. I've been with Guelph now for around 11 years or so. If you can move on to the next slide, I just wanted to talk about kind of what we're doing in our mobility side and why we were kind of offering on demand, or why we came up with it in the first place. And one of the main KPIs that we wanted to track was to reduce operational costs, to decrease the user wait times for actually booking a trip through our specialized service, and then also have that ability for some dynamic scheduling due to breakdowns or people to call in sick or anything like that. And then at the same time, also increase the capacity on our specialized vehicles and allow more people to actually use the service. So I guess from that, like, we started a pilot program, which lasted about 12 months. And if you go to the next slide, I can give you some kind of key highlights on that. So we actually increased our passenger per vehicle hour by about 4%. Our on-time pickup performance increased to about 96%. Our on-time drop-off is about 98% now. And one of the nice benefits was that we actually decreased the vehicle kilometers per trip by about 4%. So we're driving less well, we were serving more people, because at the end of the 12-month period, we actually had an increase in ridership of 7%. So we had all those reductions, and then we were still able to increase our passengers, which was, a big win-win for not only the customers, but for reducing operational costs within our agency. If you want to go to the next slide. So from that, with the software, we decided that we're going to launch 2 unique programs outside of just specialized transit within the city. So in May of 2021, actually, a few months ago, we launched 2 services. One of them we're calling the Hanlon Creek Business Park First Mile, Last Mile service. And you can see a picture there of we're actually using a conventional bus. And with that conventional bus, we have the same service hours as regular service. But within the first 4 months, we actually saw around 15,000 trips booked through that bus with one conventional bus. And because we were on demand, it actually drove about 70,000 less kilometers than if we were actually to have a conventional bus on that service. And ultimately that led to around, $63,000 just in savings in fuel and maintenance, which was incredible.
That's amazing, Jason. I think a lot of people think that going to on-demand might cost them more, even with smaller vehicles, but here you've got a big vehicle and you're saving 60 grand. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was a win-win. And I think if you go to the next slide, you'll see some key kind of KPIs. So one of the nice things about this is where like the average onboard time per passenger is now 7.7 minutes. And the average wait time is about 5.5 minutes. So previous to implementing this, that region of the city was on half-an-hour frequencies or 30-minute frequencies. So now you're waiting and you're getting to your destination in about 12 minutes. So it's very, dynamic. You can use it anytime. There's no set time that you can use it. And our overall on-time performance with this Hanlon Creek Business Park service is about 98% on-time performance. 83% of our rides are shared. And at peak times, we're seeing 15 to 18 passengers per vehicle hour, which is extremely high, especially in the on-demand realm right now. And, it's been nothing but beneficial. And we're actually seeing the same type of service or the same type of ridership if we actually still did have a conventional bus on it, but we're getting those additional operational savings, which is, helping out our overall bottom line, especially, during COVID and everything.
And is this curb to curb service, Jason?
It's actually, we have it designated, so we have it split. There's about 50% of actual bus stops that are currently in our network, and then 50% of what we're calling virtual bus stops that are around there, because part of this new service is in an area that we've never actually been in before. So most of those stops in there are virtual stops, but there was a big demand in the new industrial park to actually have transit there. And this allowed us to stay within our current envelope of budget to be able to expand our service and, get those, much needed people to their jobs out in that area. So
it's great.
Yeah. Next slide, if you can, please. The next service that we launched at the same time, May 2nd of this year, was our community bus on demand. And essentially, like a lot of municipalities, we had what was called a community bus, which kind of toured around the city. Ours had a 1-hour headway, so it came by once an hour, and it kind of utilized different locations around the city where there wasn't really transit, like medical centers, some obscure shopping malls and stuff like that, seniors' homes. And we had 2 buses on there running 8.5 hours a day, so 17 hours of service a day on 2 full-size conventional buses. And we took away that service and we put an on-demand bus, and we serviced the exact same area of the city with an on-demand bus. Historically, it's never been a big ridership route for us. We would only see about maybe like 50, 60 people a week. So there was a lot of money being dumped into this program. So it's kind of like a no-brainer that we would switch to an on-demand service. And in the first 3 months, we saw about 1,500 rides, which was about on par with what our old community bus is doing, except now we're using one 8-meter bus, and we're servicing the same area instead of using two 12-meter buses. And we saw a reduction in kilometers driven of around 16,000 kilometers, and fuel savings about 20 grand, which is, great for the first 3 months of the service. If you want to go to the next slide. So the average onboard time now is 12 minutes to go from your pickup to destination. The average wait time is around 10 minutes. So that's about 22 minutes in total. And our goal for wait times was actually 30 minutes, because we were going from a 1 hour headway down to, we figured that the winning KPI would be if we can get better than 30 minutes, you're now waiting half the time and you're providing the same service. And, right now we're pushing 10 minutes. So we went from 1 hour service where you had to wait, now you're down to 10 minutes, which is, for the people that use it and know about it within the city, I mean, they love it, because it's essentially a ride hailing service, for them personally. And again, we use a portion of stops that we've historically used within our network. And then there's also a segment of virtual stops as well that we're utilizing. And if you want to go to the next slide, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is one of the things we're doing here is we're have two electric bus programs going on right now. One is that we're in the process of upgrading our electrical at our current facility here. And one of the things I want to point out is we put in our spec something that kind of wasn't actually used yet, or there wasn't a standard for it. But we heard rumblings that it was possible to do, and that thing was sequential pantograph charging. And we took a risk by putting in the spec because we thought that there was a possibility that we might not get any bids or anything like that. But there was a company that came through, and they said that that by the time that they implement everything, that will have official SAE sign off on the sequential charging and pantographs. So because of that, we were able to only purchase 450 kilowatt chargers. And then we have 12 pantographs within our facility that we're going to install. And like I said, those are sequential charging. So once one's done, it'll flip over to the next one within its circuit, which is, something that's going to be, kind of the wave of the future as this stuff develops. And second last slide. So the next one on e-bus procurement, two things that I want to mention was, because of all the supply chain issues that are going on out there, we made sure that we put a liquidated damages clause into our contract, because we want to make sure that, once we're doing all this work in the background to get our facility ready for electric buses, that we actually have them on time. So that's one thing that I highly recommend to other agencies. And then another thing that we did was we kind of rolled the dice on is, currently in Guelph anyways, our life cycle on our conventional buses is 12 years. And we understood from most of the e-bus manufacturers out there that there wasn't a 12-year warranty for 80% state of charge. And what they could offer us was about 70% state of charge off the bat, is what we were hearing before we went out for procurement. But internally, we didn't think that that was good enough, because we wanted to make sure that all our modeling and everything was lined up. So in our actual spec, we put 80% state of charge for 12 years as what we wanted for a guarantee. And lucky for us, we did get 3 bids, and of all 3 companies did bid on that. So it is possible, and that's another thing that I would highly recommend you do, to put in to your spec, because there is a lot of municipalities out there right now going to electric buses.
Yeah, that's the hot trend right now, isn't it, Jason? Zero emission.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So are we going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and this, I guess the next steps for Guelph is we have a big project underway right now, actually, with Trapeze, And where we're moving all of our trapeze offerings, as you may or may not know, we're like a fully integrated trapeze municipality. So we have almost every single suite of products that you guys offer. And we're moving those all up into the cloud. And we're also getting all of our software suites upgraded as well to the latest and greatest version. So next time when we see you, maybe next year, something like that, we'll be able to even offer you more along the lines of what we're doing with technology.
Very good. Well, thanks, Jason. That was a great presentation. I think both components of it are dynamic and forward-leaning. And it's amazing to me that you've been able to produce savings by running microtransit with big buses. I haven't heard anybody else doing that, man. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Carla Avis Birch from Metrolinx. And when I asked Phil Verster about joining us today, Phil's a good friend of mine. I'm like his booking agent, getting him speaking at various events around the world and webinars. He said, Paul, I can't do it, but I've got just the person, Carla Avis. And man, he's right. Carla and I talked ahead of time and really clicked. There's so much on her plate. I'm excited for her to tell you about some of the cool things she's working on right now. Carla?
Thank you, Paul. And Jason, I'm really excited to see the work that Guelph is doing right now. Our business plan, our 2041 regional transportation plan really looks to lean on our partners and municipalities and other service providers to really kind of help support that first mile, last mile. And we really learned from you a little bit in some of those innovation elements that you talked about, which, we are also, as our own agency in delivering service, trying to capitalize on as well. Thank you, Paul, for that introduction, and Phil does send his regrets. And so hopefully I could kind of, be a second 2IC today to get things going. Next slide, please. I think this is just about me, which really doesn't matter. So you could look me up, but really the main part here is I've been at the organization for 16 years. I have been always in our engineering team, which was now called our capital projects team. And I'm now in our planning department, really looking at our planning efforts to really being the intake, the window to the organization around how we plan for just that, resilient communities, and making connections across the greater Golden Horseshoe. We have our design team really looking to kind of get to single option before we go out to market. And then lastly, our sponsorship team, which is new to North America, but really supporting the management of benefits through the life cycle of our capital projects. Next slide. So Metrolinx, really, I'm heartened by the theme of this particular webinar right now around building resilient communities, because at the end of the day, this is what Metrolinx is all about. We want to connect those communities. We want to do our part. We believe that we are doing our part. We believe in the work that we're doing to really bring transit options for all citizens, if you will, across the greater Golden Horseshoe. But at the same time, we do it in a way that is delivering value for the people that we are delivering for, our customers who ride the trains, and the communities in which we are actually building and bringing these new transit services. And at the end of the day, also, this is all generated by our people. We have values around serving with passion, thinking forward, and playing as a team that really speak to not only the resilience in communities from an infrastructure perspective and a climate change perspective, but really kind of helping to bring better options and being able to live, work, and play, and being able to connect not only within the region itself, but within other extremities, region to region, that we haven't done before. Next slide. So our capital program, we are doing a lot right now. As you can see, we are moving our number of trips per week to 6,000, which is a 300% increase. This is something you've heard called the Go Expansion program that we're delivering right now, bringing electrified 15-minute bi-directional service to the majority of our existing corridors. Right now, there's a couple corridors that's not currently in plan due to, you know, some of the relationships we actually have to make sure that we have the right partnerships in place for moving the trains on those corridors that are not owned by us. But really the objective here is to fill those gaps with new innovation, new technologies, as we're talking about right now, and really leverage the opportunity to do more with what we have. So we're talking expanded tracks and new stations. We're looking at bridge upgrades, which is really a partnership with those municipalities specifically because they're usually going over or under existing roadways, right? So really being able to kind of manage that technical feasibility, but also the opportunity to separate that traffic going through live communities. And then we actually have the introduction of heavy rail is always, you know, the big thing to talk about, but we have light rail transit, right? We have LRTs that are happening right now, and the province has committed to those projects, and we're in the process of, you know, finishing the early planning work and business case work on those to get shovels in the ground as soon as possible. And lastly, as part of our portfolios, we have our BRTs, which are our bus rapid transit. And those right now are a real economical way and a real additional tool in the toolkit for creating more connections and creating more opportunities for moving between different communities and within the communities themselves, using local transit, local services, local resources to bring that service. Next slide. So how do we make decisions? What do? We are a data-driven organization. So anybody who knows Phil knows that, you know, we need to understand our numbers. We need to operate like a business. Our value proposition is about our customers. Our value proposition is about making connections and integrating and creating a network effect of transit across the region, but it is based in the numbers. And we want to bring forward good transit advice to the decision makers in the province. We start at the beginning, figuring out what are we trying to do. And as you can see on that curve, the options and alternatives analysis is always the longest part. It's always the most up and down. You think you're going in one direction, you're always making a pivot at the last minute, but you're making a pivot based on value. And really that's where the value and the opportunity of the sponsorship office really comes into play. Whereby every stage that you're moving through on the project, every decision being made is really being made with a lens of bringing value to the project, to the province, and to ultimately the customers and the communities that are getting the benefit of the work that we're doing, for us to then just get out there and then make the case. We make the case in collaboration with communities. We make the case really understanding the impacts that we are bringing to all of those involved. And we want to listen. We want to listen. We want to take it back. We want to refine. We want to be able to not only invest in transit as our primary objective, but really we're investing in communities overall. Next slide. So, I mean, I think what you see right here is the growing challenge, but also the growing opportunity. These are a lot of lines, snakes on a page, but this represents a lot of people. It represents all those 300%, those 6,000 trips that we talk about, and that was just on heavy rail. So that's primarily those green lines that you see on the page. You have interconnections that are happening there with our LRT program, our 4 priority subway project programs. And really, as we go through this challenge of really building that integration and those connections across the network, we want to make sure that we are making transit competitive in more markets, that we're looking at how we integrate fare solutions that are harmonized, you know, amongst the regions. We want to align transportation with good land use planning to make sure that we are helping to support transit-oriented communities, that we are helping to support the development plans for municipalities. We know that, and we believe that, and we've seen the numbers show that, you know, transit brings people, and transit are nodes in which cities, communities build and develop around. And then finally, we're responding to emerging future mobility needs. We have a pilot that we are partnering with in our Whitby station and our Rouge Hill stations for automated vehicles. that is live, happening right now on this weekend or the following coming weekend. We'll have launching live in Rouge Hill. But really, this is city-led initiatives that we are able to participate in and really be able to kind of bring more mobile solutions, more innovative solutions that we can't do on our own. And it's all part of the partnership with the municipalities, multi-service providers, and the private sector. We cannot forget the private sector in the partnerships that need to be brought to deliver on the promise of a more integrated and connected region. And lastly, to round up on the next slide, is our commitment to our Indigenous communities, the Indigenous communities. We understand we have established an Indigenous Relations Office in 2019 in the COVID era, but we did that to make sure that we are making sure that we deliver on our obligations, that we embed the relationships, the engagement, the consultation from beginning to end, and we are getting a lot better. We are improving. We are making those relationships stronger, and we are committed to make sure that we continue to understand and build and grow in a very meaningful way. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. That was great. And one comment, I don't think you made at the beginning, but I think, aren't you guys like doing more capital projects dollar-wise than almost anyone else in North America?
I think we have that badge of honor. This is true. So, you know, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Yeah.
We have a lot of work that's going on right now, which not only is going to be, you know, over the next 10 years or so, really bringing all these amazing transit options, but we also are driving the economy. The market, the construction market that we are working with right now is really in a collaborative kind of way. We're really understanding their needs, they're understanding ours. We also are feeling some of the pressures of the supply chain and how that is really kind of bringing a level of flux and unpredictable nature to kind of the cost of our projects and our ability to deliver them as intended. But we continue to be agile, and you're right. And so I think it is a bit of a feat that we are not backing away from the challenge on.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Carla, and send our best to Phil and your whole team there. You guys are doing tremendous work. I'm very impressed. I continue to be with all the work you're doing. So now we've heard from two of the big agencies, major agencies that are providing public transportation in Ontario. Most of you may know I was a CEO myself, CEO of the MTA in Baltimore, and one of the things that I was focused on was basically trying to take our technology from what I call the 1980s, you know, into the 21st century, because 5 years ago when I was there, it felt like a lot of our equipment and technology was just stuck back in the 80s. A lot of stuff was still being done on paper. It wasn't automated. And in order to meet the needs that Jason and Carla have talked about today, we really need to use the best cutting edge technology. And as I mentioned right at the top of the show, public transit's in a place right now where, you know, from whether it's machine learning or whether it's autonomous vehicles or all, you know, all the GPS and you know, everything's in your hand now, all that stuff is cutting edge. I think we're in an amazing place, and it's a fun time to work in this industry. And so with that being said, I want to introduce two guys from our team, Geoff Gray and Tyler Dvorak, who Geoff is Vice President of Sales and Tyler is Product Director for MPS. And I wanted them to dive in a little bit more into some of the new technology that we have available you might be interested in, just kind of like what I call a big picture presentation. Basically, this is just a description of what's on the shelf, what's available right now, what transit technology is happening right now. And then Tyler's going to talk about our partnership with ESRI and what we're doing going forward. So let me introduce my good friend, Geoff Gray, who's going to walk us through where we're at when it comes to technology to help drive us into this next year and what we're doing really in this next decade.
Good. Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Jason and Carla, for your insights and showing us some of the innovation that you've introduced to your riders. Some really great stuff to see. You know, it's great to see as well the variety of agencies we have here, all different sizes, complexities, all the different modes you provide, but all in your own unique way, in one sense or another. So one thing I think you all have in common is you run these mission critical operations and you have that responsibility to deliver service for your riders. I like what you said there, Carla, focus on moving more people, not just vehicles. I might reuse that in some conversations if you don't mind. But so many of you we work with today, Metrolinx and Guelph, obviously being two partners today, and a number of you on the line. And we work with you to help you meet your objectives. But really what I'd like to discuss today is just like what Paul said, giving you a sense of kind of what the possible is with technology outside of maybe what we currently partner today on, and taking into account some of these new challenges that we're presented with in the transit space. So a few specific ways that I think we find ourselves very unique and unique in how we can partner with you. And as Paul said, how we can help you reach your goals is transit is all we do, right? So just like you folks on the line, transit is our world. This is all we do day in and day out. So our focus is 100% here. We also don't just focus on one area of your business. So you'll see here in a few slides, I'll get into our intent is to help you with every department in your organization. So sometimes we refer to that as your kind of the 360-degree view of transit, right? We really are trying to be that one-stop shop for all of your needs from one partner. And then last of all, you'll see that as we talk through the different technologies, they really are integrated and designed to work for transit workflows. So again, because they're built for transit, this is all we do. When you see the technology, when you use it, it's built for your workflows. It's intended to work in your environment. We're not trying to, pigeonhole something in that is designed for a different industry. Okay, so hopefully you'll see that throughout this. Next slide there, Ashley. Just really quickly here to give you a perspective, more than 135 of your peers in North America we're partners with today. We'd love to expand that within the 135 and even more. But just to give you a sense, a lot of your peers around you, you're partnering with Trapeze, and I think there's a lot to share in terms of best practices there as well. Next slide there, Ashley. Okay, so you'll see here, I really was thinking about how best to do this, and I think really to kind of put it in perspective, I wanted to walk through what I like to think of as kind of a day in the life of a transit organization. I know this isn't going to fit everyone's day in the life, but I think it'll help paint a picture of where technology can come in and really help with those day-to-day needs that you have. So in many cases, much of what is done today in a lot of organizations, there's still an element of pen and paper. There's an element of manual processes, and frankly, room for error and inefficiencies, right? And challenges in actually providing visibility, sometimes even more importantly, up to leaders and helping them understand how is the operation running. So much of the daily operations can really be managed through technology that's connected and is making those kind of critical connections between departments that maybe are done manually today. They're relying on, people's memories. They're relying on paper processes. That if you remove some of those inefficiencies and those rooms for error, you really can improve efficiency, save costs, and ultimately have an operation that runs very tight and cost effective. So with that said, I'm just going to kind of step around the wheel here and talk through a day in the life. So next slide there, Ashley. We're going to start here on the topic that Tyler will be jumping into here in a bit more detail in a few minutes. But we all know everything starts with a schedule, right? So we on a regular basis, obviously we dive into the schedule as a transit organization, and the tools here that we have to offer allow you to build that schedule. It allows you to modify it as necessary. Do what if scenarios. What if I were to change this route? What if I was to change the frequency here? And furthermore, what Tyler will show you is how can I use all the data that's available to me to give me insights into building a mobility plan that really is right for your community. And that's really what we want to get to. And I think, part of our conversation today is doing just that, is, the traditional ways of just, a route that may have been there for the last 20 years, maybe that's not the right way anymore. And there's a reason to change. And with the onset of COVID and everything that we've gone through over the last 2 years, demands are different. There are many reasons to have the need to look at a schedule, change it, and modify it to meet the community better. Okay. So moving on from mobility planning and scheduling, Ashley, next slide. Really, of course, it's not just about the kind of traditional big bus fixed route schedules. All of you have, or many of you have, a demand response operation as well that provides that door-to-door service. I think the technology here, Trapeze Pass, is quite well used and well known in the transit industry, and really it remains today as that the most used and the most powerful scheduling algorithm that provides you that flexibility and that intelligence to constantly be making changes on the fly to make sure you deliver that best service to your customers while also maximizing the use of your vehicles. We're actually about to release our next generation of the Pass platform. It's fully cloud-based, brand new user interface. It'll be going live here in the coming days, actually, with a customer down in Ohio. So look forward to that. For those that come to our Think Transit conference, there'll be a big splash there about our progress with moving that to the cloud. Okay, so moving around the wheel here, next slide, Ashley. We all know, of course, the schedule and what we produce there can't happen without people, of course. You're probably your top first or second expenses in your organization are the people, and of utmost importance to make sure that you manage that workforce, and can quite often be quite a complex and challenging management of workforce. So we offer technology here that allows you to manage that full pick to pay or bid to pay process and everything in between. So the uniqueness here is this technology, we configure all of your unique business rules, your union rules, your pay rules, all within the tool. And then whoever's working in the system, no matter who it is, they're automatically applying those rules to make sure you're compliant throughout the entire day of service. You're paying people correctly, you're following all the right rules, and essentially it allows you to manage that workforce in the most effective way possible. This is used by some of the largest transit authorities in North America, CTA, SEPTA, Miami, and even right down the line to some of the smallest and everything in between, because it has that flexibility of managing very unique rules. There's also some really interesting tools here for employees. So if you have a workforce out there that's demanding things like riders are, they're demanding things at their fingertips, more automation, they can have that through this. They can have employee self-service tools to look up their work assignments, to request time off, and things of that nature. So there's some benefits there for the workforce outside of what it does for them in managing their work. Okay, next slide there, Ashley. So for those that have kind of kept up with news here at Trapeze, we recently split off a division and rebranded it as Vantis. Vantis is actually all of the onboard, in-vehicle, and dispatching technology that manages that day of operations on the street. So for those that use this type of technology today, and many of you do, it's that onboard, vehicle location tracking technology that manages all of the functions on the bus, head signs, passenger counters, everything that's happening on the bus, and translates that back to the back office to make sure that the dispatchers can prioritize every incident that's coming into their queue, and they're responding to it in the exact same way every time, day in and day out. And that's exactly what this Vantis solution does for you, and connects with everything else that the Trapeze back office has in terms of whatever happens on the road. It's automatically communicated with the people management group, the scheduling group, so that everyone is in the know with that up to the minute information. Okay. Next slide there, Ashley. Okay, so we've talked about the first or second expense in your organization, your people, of course. We've talked about the schedule. We've talked about those real-time operations. But one of the highest costs in your organization as well are your assets, of course. Your buses, your rail cars, your facilities. They all need to be managed to a state of good repair and maintained in a way that you can maximize the use of them on the road and make sure that they don't disrupt service because they're down. So that's exactly where an asset management system comes in. So our EAM tool does all the basics, the asset, the work, the parts type functions you would expect. But like the rest of our technology, it also is built for transit. So it has very transit specific portals for each user, whether you're a maintenance, a mechanic, a supervisor, a parts clerk. All of it is centered around what you care about as that user. So when you dive into the system, you're only being presented with what you need to do your job, and again, the workflows of your specific job. So it's versus some of the more generic systems out there, our EAM is designed exactly for what your business needs it for. Okay. All right, moving on. We've talked a lot about kind of what happens behind the scenes to make sure that you're delivering that safe, reliable service. But what about the customers? Of course, right? The most important thing, the customers, the riders on the street riding your service, depending on your service. I think you can all agree that more than ever, riders are demanding up to the second real-time information at their fingertips and nothing less, right? So there are so many options out there, many options that we simply integrate with and provide that data to give you that real-time at their fingertips. We also offer our full suite here. You'll see we have apps, we have a website, phone system, text message capabilities, signage, you name it. However you want to message real-time info to a customer, we can support it through our technology. And you'll see here this kind of hot topic as well, MaaS, or mobility as a service. We're really keen to support our customers in their MaaS vision, whatever that may be. So MaaS means many different things to a lot of different people in the industry. Whether that means you want to be the MaaS provider and really at the center of it, or just a contributor to MaaS. We have, again, the technology behind the scenes to support any flavor of that for you. So whether it be our MaaS mobile app that's available, or any of the underlying technology that you need to ensure you can deliver that MaaS experience for your customers. So the rider, extremely important, so many ways you can support what they need. And we're here to help with that in whatever way possible. Next slide, Ashley. Okay, so all of these technologies, these systems we've talked about, they produce an abundance of data, and all of that data alone is not really enough for you to make decisions. So what we've done is we've layered on a business intelligence technology that takes all of that data, correlates it, it makes sense of it, and then it presents it in dashboards, scorecards, reports, whatever a visual way you need to then consume that data and make decisions on it. So that's really the intent of our data and analytics, our business intelligence capabilities, is to allow you to make sense of the data and then make really intelligent decisions. And that applies for any of the technology we've talked about today. And last of all, you heard Jason early on talk about their move to the cloud here. We're taking their entire Trapeze footprint up to the cloud, and that's available across our solution. So it's a hot topic, just like MaaS. We can offer a traditional on-premise deployment of our technology, or support it fully in a Trapeze cloud managed service environment. So that's available. Just wanted to throw it out there as well. Hopefully this gave you really quick view of how this big picture, as Paul called it, can help you, and how we can potentially partner more in the future. I'd love the opportunity to speak with any of you further about this. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Tyler, who will do a bit of a deeper dive into the mobility planning aspect of the technology and tell you how that can help.
Awesome. Thank you, Geoff. So yeah, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to kind of facilitate this topic. I'm super passionate about this, so really appreciate everyone's time and allow me to do my spiel here, because I think it's super important. As Geoff said, we like to say that it all starts with the right mobility plan. I believe that's 100% true. However, it's not a linear process, right? It's a cycle. In order to generate a viable, efficient, equitable mobility plan, you have to have a lot of data from a lot of different sources. Some of it more geographic in nature, things like demographic information, employment information, points of interest, right? Where are people? Who are they? Where do they live? And how are they geographically proximate to things they want to get to, like jobs, entertainment, education, healthcare. Understanding how people are moving through the system is super, super important. And understanding how changes to our system impacts our riders is really the key to getting people to switch from personal cars to public transit, right? We are competing against a mode of transportation, personal car, which is extremely expensive and extremely pollutant. It has all sorts of externalities. It's crazy. My car sits in my driveway 95% of the time. Costs a lot. If anything happens to it, it decreases in value tremendously. Why do I do it? Because it's convenient for me, right? Because it's got reliability. I have flexibility with my car that transit doesn't always provide. So understanding why people are making the decisions they do, the trade-offs that they do, is critical to getting people to switch over to transit, meeting people where they are. We don't want to assume that just because we provide a route to somebody in their area, generally walkable, or maybe what we think is walkable and they don't, that we are providing access. Access is about so much more than a static map. It's dynamic. It moves throughout the day. We'll get into more of that in a minute, but understanding that and having the ability to visualize and quantify that is super important when developing a mobility plan. By being able to speak to those things and feel confident making data-driven decisions and justifiable claims, it's a huge part of the planning process as well. In a way, planners have to sell their vision and their plan to the public, to their boards, to all kinds of stakeholders. And they are trying to keep a lot of things in sync, a lot of various stakeholders with competing priorities, all while trying to keep an eye, or I shouldn't say trying to keep an eye, definitely having to keep an eye on operational constraints. So being able to bring a justifiable plan to the public gets credibility with the public, it gets credibility with the board, and we'll get into why that's important in a little bit as well. Because ultimately, we want transit to be unsiloed. Right now, transit tends to be very reactive to what's going on in terms of transportation and land use policy and decision making. And so when we look at poorly performing transit routes, a lot of times it's because they're being forced to deliver to a suboptimal either street network or land use patterns that make it very hard to deliver something like fixed route transit everywhere. We'll get into that in a second as well. So being able to collaborate with those larger planning and municipal departments and engineering departments makes transit more part of the conversation. And by getting more public interest in investment, both emotional and financial in transit, we can also increase transit's influence over these policies that ultimately, in many ways, are determinant of their success or failure. Next slide, please, Ashley. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So bringing everything together is the key as a transit planner. As I mentioned, you're trying to keep the desires of riders from various socioeconomic backgrounds with various priorities various political influences. They're fighting against geography. You've got to take into account weather. And now we're even talking about putting, changing how we're delivering the service in terms of fuel, in terms of EVs, like Jason mentioned. EVs are great, tons of great benefits to them, both in terms of noise, in terms of course, pollution. They're very cool. However, they do add another layer of complexity to the planner's job. And again, bringing everything together in one place is key to making sure that we're keeping an eye on everything we need to keep an eye on and not missing a super important component that could derail our transit plan that we thought was bulletproof. By making sure we understand the full impact of our decisions, we can feel a lot more confident. So what does that mean? What does this have to do with Trapeze and ESRI? By bringing Trapeze and ESRI together, we're taking advantage of ESRI's world-leading mapping platform, geostatistical, spatial analysis, all that fun stuff. All those capabilities are great, right? They've got all kinds of great tools, but they are tools that need to be configured or applied in a certain way to solve transit-specific problems. Enter Trapeze. We know, as Geoff mentioned, we eat, sleep, and breathe transit. We know what our transit users need. We know the questions they're trying to answer, the problems they're trying to solve. We can make it easy by stringing these tools together so that all the user has to do is generate a couple inputs, and they'll get outputs that make sense, that are reliable, and that answer the specific questions they need without having to do an onerous process. A lot of the things that this mobility planning product will do, you could do in GIS by yourself. I've done them. They take forever. They're error prone. And because of that risk, because of that time cost, it's the reason a lot of people don't go through the bother of it. So they don't get the benefit of those tools. So by making them easy to use, by making them applicable directly to transit problems, that really is what allows us to unlock the power of ESRI's capabilities and the power of the Trapeze data that we can leverage to use those tools as well. So in the top screenshot, we see an awesome network analysis result, which shows me how far I can get in 5, 15, and 30 minutes by walking and using transit. That's awesome. At a given time of day, that's how many jobs I can get to. We can look at education, healthcare, and some other things. Tremendous. This is a great tool for understanding how high frequency changes to our network, which is a big thing right now, impacts the stability of this network access visualization. So, classic example, going back to why people still use cars. Just throw a random example from maybe my life, my kid throws a fit and doesn't want to put their shoes on before school or before we're doing anything. That cost me 5 minutes of my life, but we get them out the door, but now we're 5 minutes late and now we miss our bus. And because the bus only comes every 30 minutes, all of a sudden my access area, at 8 o'clock might be big like this graph shows. But once I'm 5 minutes late and it's every 30 minutes, now it's going to shrink considerably. If I'm not able to rely on transit to meet the variability and disruptions in my life, I'm going to probably make a decision not to use it. If I have a choice, I might do that. Or if I don't have a choice, right? If I'm a person who relies on transit, now that just had a huge impact on my life. Now I'm late for work. Now I have to make up that time, etc. It's a lot of stress that gets put on people by having, what I'd say, fragile transit systems. So by increasing the frequency, we can maintain the stability of that network and the stability of that access that transit provides. Of course, that costs money, right? So we need to keep an eye on our operational constraints. That's where Trapeze comes in. Again, we know the constraints based on the scheduling data that we have in FX of your vehicle and driver solutions. There's very specific constraints that exist in those spaces and often unique to different agencies. So understanding what those are enables us to give a much more reliable picture of what it will actually take to deliver the service that we're putting forward. And that's critical because that risk is huge. If we get to the point where we want to operationalize the service and we find out we don't have enough drivers or vehicles, we wasted a lot of time and effort. And that's a huge reason that some of the times people don't even start on this process because that risk is too big. So by, again, bringing that proactively to our users so they can feel confident about what they're doing with their plans and that they know that it's actually feasible, huge benefit and a huge stress relief. And it actually, again, enables those plans to go into operation. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Ashley. Thank you. Awesome. So going back to collaboration in ESRI Hub, right? So ESRI, being the platform that it is, allows us to do some pretty cool things with public engagement, things like story mapping, things like public feedback forums. They have a lot of great tools for interfacing with the public. A key thing, again, transit needs to do this. We do this already, but we can't do it enough, right? We can only do it more because it does definitely give us credibility with the public. People will start to vote on transit, right? These things come up for public measure all the time. And we need to make sure that transit has a voice in these policy decisions, as I mentioned before. And of course, that also involves ensuring that transit is working hand in glove with our public municipalities and the municipal planning and engineering departments to make sure that transit is being taken into consideration, has a voice, has a seat at the table when we're making policy decisions that will impact how effectively we are able to deliver on our transit goals. Okay, told you I get really excited about that. Thank you very much. I think we're ready for the next slides, Ashley.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. Great presentation, both you and Geoff, and Jason and Carla. Thank you for kind of showing us the real world application of what's happening, some of the technology that's on the shelf, and how we can do collaboration and work together to really produce, I think, in the end result, a better product for our public. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic was really an inflection point for public transportation across the world. Transit agencies had an opportunity to reevaluate what is the reason for what we are doing. Are we just a 9-to-5 commuter service, or are we really about producing other options like equity and inclusion, about cleaning up the environment, about improving the economy, and about helping provide mobility to everyone, to all of life's opportunities? And I think we've opted for that answer at the end. And so public transportation now here in the US, you all saw, just passed a big infrastructure bill with brand new funding. And of course, there in Canada, the administration was putting some money into operating dollars for the first time this last year. I think our federal governments have realized that now that public transportation is not just a local responsibility, it's a national priority. And so we're very excited to work with you, with your organization, OPTA, and with CUDA, with APTA, to continue to make that case in our nation's capitals. Two ways you can stay connected to what we're doing here. One is through our podcast, Transit Unplugged. If you don't listen, you should. It's free. It's a great half-hour education every week. I'm hoping to get Carla and Jason on in the future as guests sometime in the early part of the new year. But we basically interview a different transit executive every week and talk about what's happening in the industry, best practices, news, etc. We've got a great new look to the podcast this year. We're on our 5th season. Take a look at it at transitunplugged.com. It's a brand new website. It's streaming style, like a Netflix style website. We're starting a brand new television show, Transit Unplugged TV. I've already filmed the first 3 episodes in Las Vegas and in Memphis, and now just at the APTA conference, and hoping we can get up to some of your agencies soon as well. The other big thing we've got going on at Trapeze is a big annual conference, our first one in person for a few years. It's called Think Transit. It'll be this year, March 20th through 23rd in Fort Worth, Texas. You can go to our website, trapezegroup.com, to find out more. It is one of the most fascinating conferences that I personally ever take part in. And it's for us. It's for people that work in the public transit industry and are especially involved in the technology side. And last slide, we're here to help you. If you have any questions, you can contact myself, Geoff, or Tyler. If you need more information about what we've talked about today, we're always available to provide you more information and to help you on your journey. Thanks again for being with us today on this OPTA webinar. Thank you to all of our guests and all of you who joined us. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Take care.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to Trapeze for bringing those great examples to us today. This OPTA live webinar has been recorded, and all of the attendees today will receive an email with the recording and today's presentation. So thank you again. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.